Oh, honey, you can't be serious with that outfit.
Actually, I'm here to audit the airline service.
They saw a stained hoodie, muddy sneakers, and a man who looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. They saw a target. When Arthur boarded Flight 882 to London, the flight crew didn't just judge him, they systematically dehumanized him. They laughed at his cheap clothes, denied him service, and treated him like a stowaway in a first-class seat. They thought they were untouchable at 30,000 feet. But they made a fatal calculation. They didn't check the airline's ownership manifest. That man in the grey sweatpants wasn't just a passenger. He was the new majority shareholder, and he was currently conducting the most ruthless audit in aviation history. And by the time the wheels touched the tarmac, their careers would be over. The rain at JFK International Airport was relentless, hammering against the reinforced glass of the terminal like handfuls of gravel. Inside the first-class lounge of Horizon Apex Airlines, the atmosphere was a hermetically sealed bubble of wealth. It smelled of expensive espresso, aged leather, and the distinct, crisp scent of money. Arthur Penhaligon didn't smell like any of those things. Arthur smelled like rain, stale airport coffee, and exhaustion. He sat in the corner of the lounge, slumped into a wingback chair that cost more than most people's cars. He was wearing a pair of heather grey sweatpants that had lost their elasticity at the ankles, a pair of off-brand sneakers with a streak of mud on the toe, and a faded navy hoodie with a bleach stain on the pocket. He looked like a man who had just been fired, or perhaps evicted. He was typing furiously on a cracked smartphone, his thumbs moving a blur. Across the room, Brittany Vane, the senior purser for the upcoming flight to London, watched him with undisguised contempt. She stood by the concierge desk, adjusting her silk scarf, her uniform immaculate. Brittany was a woman who believed that the class system wasn't just a societal construct, but a moral imperative. "Is that it?" Brittany whispered to her colleague, a junior flight attendant named Timothy. She gestured with a perfectly manicured nail toward Arthur. "The lounge standards have really dropped. How did he even get in here? Did he deliver a pizza?" Timothy chuckled nervously. "Maybe he's a relative of an employee. Standby ticket?" "In the Diamond Lounge?" Brittany scoffed, smoothing her skirt. "Unlikely. Look at him. He's dragging down the property value of the room just by breathing. I bet he's an upgrade glitch. System error. I'm going to have a word with the gate agent. We can't have someone looking like a homeless shelter reject in 1A. It upsets the high-value clients." Brittany marched to the counter, her heels clicking a rhythm of authority. Arthur, meanwhile, didn't look up. He was too busy reading a PDF file titled HA Airlines, Q3 Service Protocols and Personnel Complaints. When the boarding call for Flight 882 came, Arthur waited until the very last second. He hated the scramble. He preferred to walk on when the aisle was clear. He slung his battered duffel bag over his shoulder, a bag that looked like it had survived a war zone, and shuffled toward the gate. The gate agent, a tired-looking man named Gary, scanned Arthur's boarding pass. The machine beeped a solid, affirmative green. Priority 1. Seat 1A. Gary blinked. He looked at Arthur, then back at the screen, then back at Arthur. Hold on, sir." "Is there a problem?" Arthur asked. His voice was gravelly, quiet. "The machine says 1A, Gary muttered. Well, usually we need to verify ID for high-priority tickets when the appearance doesn't match the profile." Arthur sighed, reaching into his hoodie pocket. "My appearance doesn't match the profile? What does the profile look like, Gary? Does it wear a tie?" "It's just protocol, sir," Gary said defensively. From behind the desk, Brittany Vane appeared, crossing her arms. She had boarded early to prep the cabin, but had come back up the jet bridge to deal with a catering issue. She saw Arthur, and her eyes narrowed into slits. "Is there an issue, Gary?" she asked, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. "Just verifying the passenger, Brittany," Gary said. Brittany turned to Arthur, looking him up and down as if he were a stain on a carpet. "Sir, I think you might be confused. Economy boarding is in Zone 4. That line is going to be forming in about 20 minutes. You're in the priority lane." Arthur looked at her. He had deep, dark eyes that usually held a spark of humor, but today they were flat and cold. "I know which lane I'm in. I'm in seat 1A. Brittany let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a practiced sound, meant to demean. "Seat 1A. Sir, seat 1A costs $12,000 one way. Are you sure you didn't print out a joke ticket? Or maybe you found it on the floor?" "Scan it again," Arthur said, holding out his phone. Brittany snatched the scanner from Gary. "I'll handle this. We don't want to hold up the actual first-class passengers behind him." She aimed the laser at Arthur's phone, hoping, praying for a red light. Beep! Green! She stared at it. She shook the scanner and did it again. Beep! Green. "Must be a computer error," Brittany muttered, her face flushing slightly. "We've been having system glitches all week. Look, sir, I can let you board, but once we're on the plane, if the manifest shows a duplicate, or if the real Mr. Penhaligon shows up, you're going to be escorted off by federal marshals. Do you understand? This isn't a Greyhound bus." "I understand the risks, Brittany," Arthur said softly. "I'll take my chances." He walked past her, down the jet bridge. Brittany turned to Timothy, who was standing behind her. "Keep an eye on him," she hissed. "Watch him like a hawk. If he steals so much as a packet of nuts, I want him in zip ties. He's obviously a fraud or a con artist working the system. I'm not letting a bum ruin my cabin." Arthur walked onto the plane. The first-class cabin of the Boeing 777 was magnificent. Soft ambient lighting, lie-flat suites, gold accents. He found suite 1A. He shoved his dirty duffel bag into the overhead bin, struggling slightly with the latch. A passing businessman in a bespoke suit, seated in 2A, watched him with a sneer. "Excuse me," the businessman said to a passing flight attendant. "Is the janitorial staff still finishing up? This man is blocking the aisle." Arthur ignored him, sat down, and buckled his seatbelt. He closed his eyes. He wasn't sleeping. He was listening. He was listening to the galley chatter just a few feet away. "Did you see him?" Brittany's voice carried clearly through the curtain. "It's disgusting. He smells like wet dog. I bet he used miles. Or maybe he's an employee non-rev who got lucky. I hate it when they let the riffraff up front. It cheapens the brand." "Should I offer him the pre-departure champagne?" a younger voice asked. That was Lucy, the junior flight attendant. "Don't waste the Dom Perignon on him," Brittany snapped. "He wouldn't know the difference between vintage champagne and sparkling cider. Give him tap water. If he asks for champagne, tell him we're rationing it for the paying customers until we're airborne." Arthur opened his eyes. He pulled a small, leather-bound notebook from his hoodie pocket. He wrote down the time, the flight number, and 3 words. Brittany Vane, strike 1. The plane reached cruising altitude, soaring above the cloud layer into the blinding sunlight of the Atlantic crossing. The seatbelt sign pinged off. In the first-class cabin, the service began. It was a choreographed ballet of luxury. Brittany Vane moved through the cabin with the grace of a swan, pouring drinks, fluffing pillows, and charming the passengers in seats 2A through 4F. She laughed at the businessman's terrible jokes in 2A. She offered a warm towel to the elderly woman in 3B with a smile that looked genuine. But whenever she approached row 1, the temperature seemed to drop. Arthur had his tray table down. He was reading a thick document, marking paragraphs with a red pen. Drink? Brittany asked. She didn't say, sir. She didn't smile. She stood with her hip cocked, holding a bottle of water. I'd like a glass of the Cabernet, please, Arthur said, not looking up. The 2015 vintage you have on the menu. We're out, Brittany lied smoothly. She didn't even check the cart. I have orange juice or water. Arthur looked up. He could see the bottle of the 2015 Cabernet sitting on the top of her cart, uncorked, breathing. That bottle right there looks like the Cabernet. Brittany rolled her eyes, a gesture so unprofessional it was almost impressive. That is reserved for Mr. Henderson in 2A. He's a Gold Elite member. He requested it specifically. As I said, I have water. Water is fine, Arthur said. She slammed a plastic cup, not the crystal glass everyone else got, onto his table. Water sloshed over the rim, soaking the corner of his document. Oops, she said, deadpan. Turbulence. She walked away without offering a napkin. Arthur calmly took a napkin from his pocket and dabbed the paper dry. He wrote in his notebook, denial of service, lying to passenger, intentional property damage. Strike 2. 20 minutes later, the meal service began. The smell of roasted lamb and truffle mashed potatoes wafted through the cabin. It was intoxicating. Lucy, the junior flight attendant who had suggested the champagne earlier, began serving from the front. She looked nervous. She approached Arthur with a tray. Sir, for your starter, we have the lobster bisque, or the... Brittany suddenly materialized, grabbing Lucy's arm. She pulled her back into the galley, the curtain fluttering, but not closing completely. Arthur leaned forward. He gets the chicken, Brittany whispered harshly. But Brittany, Lucy whispered back, the manifest says we have enough lobster for everyone. And he's in 1A. He gets first choice. He gets the chicken, Brittany hissed. The chicken is the backup meal for when we run out. It's the dry breast from the economy menu plated on china. Save the lobster for the crew meal. I'm not wasting good seafood on a guy who looks like he dumpster dives for dinner. Besides, look at him. He probably prefers chicken nuggets. I don't think that's right, Lucy said. He's a passenger. I am the purser, Lucy, Brittany snapped. I run this cabin. You do what I say, or I'll write you up for insubordination. Do you want to be on domestic flights to Cleveland for the next year? Give him the chicken. Lucy emerged from the galley, her face pale. She walked to Arthur. Her hands were shaking slightly. I'm so sorry, sir, she said softly, her voice trembling. We seem to have had a catering error. We are out of the lobster. And the lamb. We only have the chicken breast available. Arthur looked at Lucy. He saw the fear in her eyes. He saw that she was being bullied just as much as he was. It's not your fault, Lucy, Arthur said gently. The chicken is fine. I can get you an extra dessert, she offered, trying to make amends. We have the chocolate lava cake. I'd like that, Arthur said. Thank you, Lucy. She served him the chicken. It was dry, rubbery, and clearly not first-class standard. Arthur took a small bite, then set his fork down. From the galley, loud laughter erupted. It was Brittany and the pilot, Captain Roger Halloway, who had come out for a break. No way! A deep male voice boomed. Captain Halloway. You gave him the economy chicken? That's legendary. He ate it like a dog, Roger. Brittany laughed. I swear these people think just because they scrape together enough points for a ticket, they belong here. It's pathetic. I bet he's going to ask for a doggy bag later. Well, as long as he stays quiet, Roger chuckled. I don't want any trouble. Just keep the wine flowing for Henderson in 2A. He's a buddy of the CEO. Oh, I am, Brittany said. I told the hobo we were out of the good red. He believed me. Arthur sat in silence. He wasn't eating. He was staring out the window at the endless blue horizon. He reached for his phone. He opened an app that was connected to the in-flight Wi-Fi. It wasn't a browser. It was the internal communication channel for the Horizon Apex Board of Directors. He began to type a message. To Board of Directors, Horizon Apex, from A. Penhaligon, majority shareholder. Subject, immediate personnel review. Flight, HA882. Current status, Mid-Atlantic. The culture of rot we suspected is worse than the quarterly reports indicated. It is not just incompetence. It is maliciousness. I am currently being denied paid-for services based on appearance. The purser is misappropriating inventory, stealing lobster, wine. The captain is complicit in passenger mockery. Prepare the London team. I want the ground manager, the station chief, and HR legal counsel waiting at the gate upon arrival. Do not alert the crew. I want to see how far they will go. He hit send. Arthur took a sip of his warm water. He looked at the half-eaten, dry chicken. He pressed the call button. Brittany appeared, looking annoyed. Yes? What is it now? This chicken, Arthur said, pointing to it. It's cold, and it's undercooked. It's fine, Brittany snapped. That's how it's prepared. Sous vide. It's raw in the middle, Brittany, Arthur said, cutting it open to show the pink meat. This is a health hazard. Brittany sighed loudly, rolling her eyes toward the ceiling. Fine, I'll take it away. But we don't have anything else. You'll just have to wait for the snack basket. She snatched the plate. Anything else? Or are you done complaining? Actually, Arthur said, his voice hardening just a fraction. I'd like to speak to the captain. Brittany froze. She stared at him, a cruel smile playing on her lips. The captain. You want to bother the captain because you don't like your chicken. Sir, the captain is flying the plane. He doesn't have time for this. I heard him in the galley 5 minutes ago, Arthur said. He's not flying the plane. He's on break. Send him out. No, Brittany said. She leaned in, her voice a venomous whisper. Here is what is going to happen. You are going to sit there, you are going to be quiet, and you are going to land. If you bother me or my crew one more time, I will have the captain radio ahead to have you arrested for interfering with a flight crew. That is a federal offense. Do you want to go to jail in London, sir? I hear the cells are very drafty. She pulled back, smiling brightly for the benefit of the other passengers. Let me know if you need any more water. She spun around and walked away. Arthur watched her go. He opened his notebook again. Brittany Vane, threatening a passenger, refusing access to the captain. Strike 3. He closed the book. The audit was technically finished. He had seen enough. But the flight was long, and Arthur Penhaligon had a feeling things were about to get much, much worse before they landed. He decided to wait. He wanted to see the look on her face when the homeless man fired her. But then, the plane jolted. A sudden, violent drop that sent a glass shattering in the galley. The seatbelt sign flashed on. Ladies and gentlemen, Captain Holloway's voice crackled over the intercom, sounding tense. We have a bit of unexpected turbulence. Flight attendants, take your seats immediately. In the chaos of the jolt, Arthur's phone slid off his tray table and skittered across the floor, sliding under the curtain into the galley. My phone, Arthur muttered, unbuckling his seatbelt. Sit down! Brittany screamed from her jump seat near the front. Sit down, you idiot! Arthur stood up, balancing against the shaking floor, and took 2 steps toward the galley to retrieve his property. Brittany unbuckled, lunged forward and shoved him. She shoved him hard. Arthur stumbled back, falling into his seat, his shoulder slamming against the window frame. I said, sit down! Brittany yelled, her face red with rage. "That's it! That is it! You are done!" She grabbed the interphone handset. "Captain, we have a level 2 threat in the cabin. Seat 1A. He's out of his seat and aggressive. I had to physically restrain him, requesting police upon arrival." Arthur sat there, rubbing his shoulder. He looked at Brittany, who was glaring at him with triumph. She thought she had won. She thought she had just justified everything she had done to him. Arthur didn't say a word. He just picked up his notebook. Assault, false reporting of a security threat. He looked at her, and, for the first time, he smiled. It was a cold, terrifying smile. "I hope you enjoyed the flight, Brittany," he whispered, "because it's your last one." The turbulence subsided, but the atmosphere in the cabin was more volatile than the air outside. The seatbelt sign pinged off, but the tension remained suffocating. Captain Roger Holloway emerged from the cockpit, adjusting his hat. He was a large man with a flushed face and the kind of arrogance that comes from 20 years of unchecked authority. He didn't look at the passengers. He looked straight at Arthur. Brittany stood beside him, arms crossed, playing the victim perfectly. She pointed a manicured finger at Seat 1A. "He lunged at me, Roger. He was shouting. I felt unsafe. If I hadn't pushed him back, who knows what he would have done." Holloway marched over to Arthur's suite. He loomed over the seated man, casting a shadow across Arthur's tray table. "Listen to me, pal," Holloway boomed, his voice deep and threatening. "You're already in deep water. Federal aviation laws are very clear about interfering with a flight crew. You do that again, you so much as sneeze in a way my purser doesn't like, and I will have you in zip ties and duct tape for the next 4 hours. Do you understand?" Arthur looked up calmly. He didn't flinch. "I understand that your purser assaulted me when I tried to retrieve my phone, Captain. And I understand that you are threatening a passenger without investigating the claim." "I don't need to investigate," Holloway sneered. "I trust my crew. I don't trust guys who look like they crawled out of a drain pipe. Now hand over your passport. I need to radio your details to London police." Arthur reached into his bag. As he did, Mr. Henderson in seat 2A, the man drinking the wine Arthur had been denied, suddenly patted his jacket pocket. "My watch," Henderson announced, his voice rising in panic. "My Patek Philippe. It's gone. I took it off during the turbulence and put it on the armrest. It's gone." The cabin went silent. Brittany's eyes lit up. It was a predatory gleam. She looked at Henderson, then at Arthur, and then she smiled. It was the moment she realized she could bury this man completely. "Mr. Henderson," Brittany said, her voice dripping with concern. "Are you sure?" "Positive. It's a $40,000 timepiece," Henderson shouted. He glared at Arthur. "He was up, during the bumps. He fell into the aisle right next to my seat. He must have swiped it." "That is a serious accusation," Arthur said, his voice ice cold. "I haven't touched your property." "We'll see about that," Brittany said. She turned to the captain. "Roger, we need to search him. If he has stolen property, it escalates this from a disturbance to a felony." "Open the bag," Holloway commanded Arthur. "You have no legal right to search my personal effects without a warrant," Arthur stated firmly. "This is international airspace." "I am the captain of this ship," Holloway roared. "My word is the law up here. Open the bag, or we open it for you." Arthur stared at them for a long moment. He saw the gleam of excitement in Brittany's eyes. She wanted to humiliate him. She wanted to dig through his dirty laundry and expose him as the trash she believed him to be. "Fine," Arthur said quietly. "But remember this moment. Remember exactly what you are doing." He unzipped the battered duffel bag. Brittany stepped forward, not wearing gloves. She grabbed the bag and upended it onto the pristine floor of the first-class aisle. Out tumbled a pair of muddy jogging shoes, a pile of tangled phone chargers, several books on corporate law, and a plastic bag containing toiletries. There was no watch. "Check his pockets," Henderson yelled from 2A. "He's probably wearing it." "Stand up and empty your pockets," Holloway ordered. Arthur stood up. He pulled out his wallet, a cheap Velcro nylon wallet. He pulled out his phone. He turned his pockets inside out. Lint fell out. No watch. Brittany kicked through the pile of clothes on the floor with her heel. "It has to be here. He probably hid it in his seat." She began tearing the cushions off Arthur's suite. She ripped the Velcro backing off the headrest. She opened the small storage compartments and slammed them shut. "Nothing!" she hissed, frustrated. Then a small, timid voice spoke up from the galley. Excuse me?" It was Lucy. She was holding a heavy silver watch. "Mr. Henderson?" Lucy said, her voice shaking. "I found this in the bathroom, on the sink. You must have left it there when you went to wash your hands before the turbulence hit." The silence that followed was deafening. Henderson turned red. He patted his pockets again, looking flustered. "Oh, yes, I suppose I did. Well, good show. Thank you, dear." He took the watch and sat back down, not offering a single word of apology to Arthur. Brittany looked furious, not relieved that a theft hadn't occurred, but furious that her scapegoat was innocent. She looked at Arthur, who was standing amidst his scattered belongings, his private items strewn across the floor like garbage. "Well," Brittany sniffed, "pick it up. You're making a mess of the aisle." She turned to Lucy. "And you," she whispered harshly, grabbing Lucy's arm as she passed. "Next time, you bring that to me first. You made us look like idiots. I'm writing you up for procedure violation when we land. You're finished, Lucy." Arthur knelt on the floor. He began to fold his humble clothes. He placed the books back in the bag. He was deliberate. He was slow. He looked up at Lucy, who was fighting back tears near the galley curtain. He gave her a small, reassuring nod. Then he looked at Brittany Vane. She was back at the concierge desk, pouring more wine for Henderson, laughing off the incident. Arthur took out his notebook. False accusation of theft, illegal search of property, captain complicit in harassment, intimidation of witness, Lucy. He checked the time. They were 2 hours out of London. He put the notebook away and retrieved his phone. He had one more email to send. To Protocol Office, London, Heathrow. From A. Penhaligon, subject, the Welcoming Committee, change of plans. Do not just bring the local police. I want the entire Executive Review Board present at the gate. I want the Director of Flight Operations, and bring the termination papers, all of them. Also, arrange for a private car for a flight attendant named Lucy. She is getting a promotion. P.S. Make sure the police play along for the first 5 minutes. The rest of the flight was a study in isolation. The crew ignored Arthur completely. They didn't offer him water. They didn't clear his trash. When the pre-arrival snack was served, warm scones with clotted cream, Brittany skipped row 1 entirely. She served everyone else, the scent of fresh baking filling the cabin, and walked right past Arthur with a smirk. Arthur didn't care. He was busy. He was accessing the airline's HR database via the secure server. He was reading Brittany Vane's personnel file. It was a litany of complaints, rudeness to economy passengers, clashes with gate agents, missing inventory on 3 separate flights. But she had always survived because she knew how to charm the management, and because her father was a mid-level executive in the logistics division. She thought she was protected. Arthur swiped to Captain Holloway's file. It was cleaner, but there were notes about arrogance and resistance to new safety protocols. Arthur closed the files. The jury had deliberated. The verdict was in. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Holloway." The intercom crackled. We have begun our initial descent into London Heathrow. The weather is a brisk 12 degrees Celsius with light rain. We'll be on the ground in 20 minutes. Then, the tone of his voice changed slightly. It became tighter, more clipped. Flight attendants, prepare cabin for arrival, and, Purser Vane, please report to the cockpit immediately. Brittany frowned. She smoothed her skirt and marched to the front. She opened the cockpit door and slipped inside. Arthur, with his sharp hearing, caught the muffled conversation. "What is it, Roger?" "Traffic control just radioed." Holloway sounded confused. "They aren't sending us to the normal gate. They're diverting us to the remote stand, usually reserved for diplomatic flights or high-risk security issues." "It's him," Brittany said, her voice muffled but audible to Arthur. "They must have taken your report seriously. They're sending the heavy hitters to arrest him, maybe counter-terrorism. Oh, this is perfect. I hope they tase him." "It's weird, though," Holloway said. "They asked for the full crew manifest. Names, employee IDs, everything. Standard procedure for a security incident," Brittany assured him. "Don't worry, Roger. We stick to the story. He was aggressive, he was erratic, he made a threat. Henderson will back us up. He hates the guy." The door opened, and Brittany stepped out. She looked at Arthur. She was beaming. It was the smile of someone who believes they have just won the lottery. She walked over to his seat. She leaned down, invading his personal space. "Just so you know," she whispered, the captain radioed ahead. "We aren't going to a normal gate. Police are waiting on the tarmac. You're going to be escorted off in handcuffs in front of the whole plane. I hope you have a good lawyer, although looking at your shoes, you probably have a public defender." Arthur looked at her. "You seem very confident, Brittany." "I am," she said, "because people like you don't win against people like me. We are the face of the airline. You're just a seat filler." "The face of the airline," Arthur repeated thoughtfully. "That's an interesting phrase. You know, faces change." "Not this one," she said, winking. "Buckle up, trash. It's going to be a bumpy landing." The plane descended through the grey London clouds. The wheels deployed with a heavy thud. The engines roared in reverse thrust as they touched down on the wet runway. As the plane slowed, it didn't turn toward the main terminal. Instead, it taxied for a long time, heading toward a secluded section of the airport near the private hangars. Arthur looked out the window. He saw a convoy of black SUVs waiting on the tarmac. There were also 2 police cruisers with flashing blue lights. Standing in the rain were 6 figures in dark suits holding umbrellas. "Look at that!" the businessman in 2A laughed. "VIP treatment for the criminal." The plane came to a halt. The engines whined down. "Ladies and gentlemen," Holloway announced, "please remain seated. We have a security situation to resolve before we can deplane. Authorities will be boarding shortly." Brittany stood at the front of the cabin, striking a pose of authority. She unlocked the main cabin door. The stairs were rolled up. The door swung open. The cold London air rushed in. 2 uniformed police officers stepped on board first. They looked serious. Brittany nodded to them, pointing a finger directly at Arthur. "That's him," she said loud enough for the cabin to hear. "Seat 1A. The one who assaulted me." The officers didn't move toward Arthur. They stepped aside. Behind them, 3 men in expensive tailored suits boarded. They were soaked from the rain, but they didn't care. In the center was a man Arthur recognized immediately. Marcus Sterling, the Chief of Operations for Europe. Wait, Sterling is a forbidden name. Correction, Marcus Stone. No, Stone is forbidden. Marcus Wright. Let's use Marcus Wright. Marcus Wright stepped onto the plane. He was a terrifying man in the boardroom, known for firing people for typing too loudly. Brittany's smile faltered slightly. She expected a sergeant, not the chief of operations. "Mr. Wright?" she stammered. I didn't expect corporate to be here. But yes, the situation is under control. The passenger in 1A is—" Marcus Wright ignored her. He didn't even look at her. He walked right past her, his eyes fixed on seat 1A. He walked up to Arthur, who was still sitting calmly with his seatbelt fastened. The entire first-class cabin watched. Mr. Henderson leaned forward, expecting to see Arthur dragged out. Marcus Wright stopped in front of Arthur. He bowed his head slightly, a gesture of immense respect. "Mr. Penhaligon," Marcus said, his voice clear and projecting through the silent cabin. "On behalf of the European Board, I apologize for the delay in your arrival. We received your transmission." Arthur unbuckled his seatbelt. He stood up. He stretched his back. "Hello, Marcus," Arthur said. "It has been a very educational flight." Brittany Vane stood by the door, her mouth slightly open. Her brain was trying to process the image. The chief of operations was bowing to the man in the dirty sweatpants. "I'm sorry," Brittany interrupted, a nervous laugh escaping her lips. "Mr. Wright, there must be a mistake. That man is the security threat. He's the one we're arresting." Marcus Wright slowly turned to face Brittany. His face was a mask of cold fury. "Arresting," Marcus repeated. "Ms. Vane, do you know who this is?" He's a disturbingly dressed passenger who assaulted me," Brittany insisted, though her voice was losing its strength. "This," Marcus said, gesturing to Arthur, "is Arthur Penhaligon. He is the majority shareholder of Horizon Apex Airlines. He owns 51% of this company. He is the chairman of the board. He effectively signs your paycheck." The silence that fell over the cabin was absolute. It was heavier than gravity. Mr. Henderson in 2A dropped his fork. It clattered loudly on his plate. Brittany Vane turned a color that human skin should not turn. It was a mix of grey and translucent white. She looked at Arthur. She looked at his dirty hoodie. She looked at his muddy shoes. "The owner?" she whispered. Arthur stepped into the aisle. He picked up his battered duffel bag. He looked different now. He didn't look like a bum. He looked like a titan who had just finished playing a game. He walked slowly toward Brittany. He stopped inches from her face. "You told me," Arthur said softly, "that I was just a seat filler. You told me that I didn't belong here." He pulled the small notebook from his pocket. He held it up. "I have documented every interaction on this flight, Brittany. The denial of service, the theft of inventory, the bullying of your junior colleague, the false police report." He tapped the notebook against the palm of his hand. "And you were right about one thing," Arthur said. "Police are here." Arthur turned to the two police officers who were waiting by the door. "Officers," Arthur said, "I would like to file formal charges against this employee for assault and filing a false police report. I have multiple witnesses, including the cockpit voice recorder, which will prove she lied to the captain." "Wait!" Brittany cried out, grabbing Arthur's sleeve. "Sir, Mr. Penhaligon, please, I didn't know. If I had known it was you, I would have—" Arthur pulled his arm away, as if her touch burned him. "If you had known," Arthur interrupted, his voice booming now, "you would have treated me like a king. And that is the problem, Brittany. You treated me like garbage because you thought I was weak. You judged me by my clothes. You judged me by my face." Arthur leaned in close. "Character is how you treat those who can do nothing for you. And your character, Miss Vane, is rot." He turned to Marcus Wright. "Marcus, fire her. Immediately, for cause, no severance, and cancel her flight benefits for life." "Done," Marcus said. "And the captain?" Marcus asked. Arthur looked toward the cockpit. Captain Halloway was peeking out, his face pale with terror. "Suspended pending a full investigation," Arthur said. "But he's not the one I want right now." Arthur looked around the cabin until he found Lucy. She was standing in the back galley, looking terrified. "Lucy," Arthur called out. "Come here, please." Lucy walked forward, her hands trembling. She thought she was going to be fired too. Arthur smiled. It was the first genuine smile anyone had seen on his face for 7 hours. "Lucy, you were the only person on this plane who treated me like a human being," Arthur said warmly. "You tried to feed me. You found the watch. You tried to protect me even when you were threatened." Arthur turned to Marcus. "Marcus, what is the opening for the head of customer experience training in London?" "It's vacant, sir," Marcus replied. Arthur turned back to Lucy. "It's yours. Triple your current salary. No more flying. You're going to teach this airline how to be kind again." Lucy burst into tears. Arthur hoisted his bag. He looked at Brittany one last time. She was sobbing now, realizing her life, as she knew it, was over. "Get out of my way," Arthur said. Brittany stepped aside. Arthur walked down the stairs into the rain, where a black limousine was waiting. But the story wasn't over. Because Arthur Penhaligon wasn't just firing people. He was about to sue them. And Mr. Henderson in seat 2A was about to learn that being a Gold Elite member didn't protect you from a defamation lawsuit. The rain at Heathrow had turned into a deluge, blurring the runway lights into streaks of neon and steel. The remote stand, usually reserved for heads of state, now looked like a crime scene. Arthur Penhaligon stood under the shelter of the black umbrella held by Thomas Wright, the chief of operations. Arthur watched the scene unfold with the dispassionate gaze of a judge who had already signed the death warrants. Inside the aircraft, the illusion of power had completely collapsed. 2 officers from the Metropolitan Police boarded the plane. They weren't the friendly community support officers. They were grim-faced, efficient, and wet. Brittany Vane was standing near the cockpit door, wiping mascara from her cheeks. She was still trying to salvage her dignity. When she saw the officers approach, she straightened her spine, reverting to her default setting. Deflection. "Officers," she said, her voice wavering but loud. "Thank goodness, that man, the owner or whoever he claims to be, he has created a hostile work environment. I want to file a counter-complaint for workplace harassment." The older officer, Sergeant Davies, didn't even blink. He held up a tablet. "Ms. Vane, we have received a digital packet from the complainant containing audio recordings of the flight. We have listened to the files regarding the assault and the security threat." Brittany froze. "Recordings? That's illegal. He can't record me." "Actually?" Thomas Wright's voice cut in from the doorway, sharp as a razor. "According to the employment contract you signed, Horizon Apex reserves the right to monitor all cabin activity for quality assurance. Mr. Penhaligon is the owner of the surveillance equipment. He can record whatever he likes." Sergeant Davies stepped forward. "Ms. Vane, you radioed a Level 2 security threat to air traffic control. You claimed a passenger was violent and attempting to breach the cockpit. The audio evidence clearly demonstrates that the passenger was seated and you initiated physical contact. Making a false report regarding aviation security is a serious offense under the Aviation Security Act. You are under arrest." "Arrest?" Brittany shrieked. It was a sound that cracked the tension in the cabin. "For doing my job? You can't arrest me. I'm the senior purser." "Turn around, please," Davies said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. The click of the steel cuffs was audible all the way back to row 4. Arthur watched from the bottom of the stairs as Brittany was led down. She looked small now. The arrogance that had filled the cabin at 30,000 feet had evaporated, leaving behind a terrified woman in a rumpled uniform. As she passed Arthur, she didn't look at him. She stared at her shoes, the expensive heels she had used to judge him, now splashing into a puddle of oil and rainwater. "Next," Arthur said quietly to Thomas. "The captain." Captain Roger Holloway came down the stairs on his own, holding his flight bag. He had removed his hat. He looked pale, sweating despite the cold wind. He walked straight up to Thomas Wright, ignoring Arthur. "Thomas," Holloway said, trying to muster a collegial tone. "Look, this is a mess. I had bad intel. Brittany told me he was dangerous. I was just following protocol. You know how it is. We can smooth this over with a report." Thomas Wright looked at the captain with profound disappointment. "Roger, you've been with us for 15 years. You know the protocol for a level 2 threat requires visual confirmation by the captain or the first officer. You didn't check. You stayed in the cockpit because you were on a break." I trusted my crew," Holloway stammered. "No," Arthur spoke up. His voice was gravel. "You mocked a passenger in the galley. I heard you. Legendary, you called it. You laughed about feeding me the economy meal." Arthur stepped closer to the pilot. "A captain's job isn't just to fly the plane, Roger. It's to protect the souls on board. You didn't protect me. You joined in the bullying." Arthur turned to Thomas. "Suspend his license pending the internal review. And Thomas, check the fuel logs. I have a feeling Captain Holloway has been expensing fuel surcharges for routes he isn't taking to cover up his efficiency ratings." Holloway's eyes widened. It was a specific, technical accusation, one that was entirely accurate. Holloway had been cutting corners for years, and Arthur, who had spent the last week reading the raw data of the company, knew it. "You can't prove that," Holloway whispered. "I own the servers, Roger," Arthur said. "I can prove what you had for breakfast in 2018. Get him out of here." Holloway was escorted into a separate company van, not by police, but by the airline's internal security team. His career as a pilot was effectively over. Finally, the passengers began to deplane. They walked past Arthur with heads bowed, terrified that they might be next. But Arthur ignored them. He was waiting for one specific man. Mr. Henderson from seat 2A. Henderson walked down the stairs, clutching his briefcase. He saw Arthur and tried to scurry toward the VIP bus. "Mr. Henderson," Arthur called out. Henderson stopped. He turned slowly. He put on a fake, oily smile. "Ah, Mr. Penhaligon. Quite the misunderstanding, yes? I suppose emotions were high. Dreadful business with that stewardess. Glad you got it sorted. I'll just be on my way." "You accused me of theft," Arthur said, cutting him off. "Well, I was mistaken," Henderson chuckled nervously. "My watch was in the lavatory. Silly me, no harm done, right?" "You demanded a strip search," Arthur continued. "You shouted that I was a criminal in front of a cabin full of people. You damaged my reputation." "Now see here," Henderson puffed up, his entitlement returning. "I am a Gold Elite member. I spend £50,000 a year with this airline. You can't talk to me like this. I'm a customer." Arthur nodded to Thomas Wright. Thomas handed Arthur a tablet. Arthur tapped the screen 3 times. "Not anymore," Arthur said. "What?" Henderson asked. "I just deleted your account," Arthur said calmly. "Your status, your miles, your future bookings, all gone. You are permanently banned from Horizon Apex and all our partner airlines. That includes the flight you have booked for next Tuesday to Dubai. You'll have to take a boat." "You can't do that," Henderson shouted, his face turning purple. "I'll sue you. Do you know who I am? I am a partner at Blackwood and Associates." "I know," Arthur said. "I know exactly who you are. And since you mentioned lawsuits, Mr. Henderson, you made a defamatory statement in a public setting that accused the chairman of a multi-billion-dollar corporation of a felony. My legal team is already drafting the paperwork for a civil suit regarding character defamation." Arthur stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I don't want your money, Mr. Henderson. I have enough. But I am going to keep you in court for so long and make the proceedings so public that by the time we are done, no client will ever trust your judgment again. You judged a book by its cover. Now the book is going to throw the library at you." Henderson stood there, mouth open, rain soaking his expensive suit. He looked at the bus, then back at Arthur. He realized with a sinking horror that his arrogance had just cost him his lifestyle. Arthur turned his back on him. "Thomas, get Lucy. My car is waiting." 3 months later, Brittany Vane sat in a sterile London courtroom, her luxury life replaced by a cheap grey suit. She had initially attempted to spin the story to the tabloids, claiming she was the victim of a power play. Arthur's response had been swift and devastating. He released a video filmed by a teenager in seat 3F. The clip, titled "Flight Attendant Bullies Homeless Billionaire," had 40 million views. It showed the unvarnished truth. Brittany kicking Arthur's clothes, Henderson screaming, and Arthur silently, dignifiedly folding his laundry. "They're offering a plea deal," her court-appointed lawyer whispered urgently. "Suspended sentence and a public apology. If we fight this evidence, you're looking at jail time." "I can't apologize," Brittany hissed. "I need my pension." "Ms. Vane, the airline is also suing you for breach of contract to recoup the £40,000 flight diversion cost," the lawyer said bluntly. "You are already unhireable. Take the deal." Brittany looked at the empty gallery. Her friends from the airline had abandoned her the moment the zero-tolerance memo went out. Realizing she was truly alone, she wept. Fine. Miles away, inside the Horizon Apex boardroom, the atmosphere was very different. Arthur sat at the head of the table, flanked by Lucy, whose new title, Director of Passenger Care, was printed on the agenda. "The Henderson lawsuit?" Arthur asked. "Update?" "He settled this morning," the General Counsel reported. "He agreed to a full public retraction and a £100,000 donation to the East London homeless shelter." Arthur nodded. "Good." He looked around at his nervous executives. "Does everyone understand why we did this? We didn't do it to punish Brittany Vane. She was a symptom. The disease was the belief that dignity is something you buy with a ticket." He gestured to Lucy. "Lucy has prepared the new training curriculum. It involves mandatory shifts in the economy cabin for all senior pursers, and a new rule: if you are rude to a passenger based on their appearance, you are gone." Arthur stood up, a faint smile playing on his lips. "I'm going to be flying a lot more. Sometimes in a suit, sometimes in shorts. Make sure your teams are ready. The audit never truly ends." 6 months after Flight 882, Arthur Penhaligon's airline was thriving, with customer satisfaction at an all-time high. Brittany Vane's life, however, had collapsed. She now lived in a cramped studio and worked a mall kiosk, selling cheap perfume. The sisterhood of the crew had vanished, leaving her bitter and convinced Arthur was a villain who had destroyed her life for sport. One rainy Tuesday, Nigel Baxter, a producer for the tabloid show The Real Story, leaned over her counter. "We think you got a raw deal," he said, sliding a business card across the glass. "The billionaire versus the working girl. We want to give you a platform and a significant paycheck to tell your side." Brittany hesitated. "I signed a non-disclosure agreement. He could sue me." "Let him," Nigel scoffed. If the public backs you, he won't dare. This is your chance to strike back. Driven by desperation and a desire for revenge, Brittany agreed. 3 days later, under hot studio lights, she spun her narrative. She wept on cue, painting Arthur not as a victim, but as an agent provocateur. He came on board looking like a threat, she told the camera, her voice trembling. I was protecting my passengers. And now, I can't afford to eat because a man worth billions got his feelings hurt. The promo teaser aired that night. The flight attendant speaks. Victim or bully? It went viral instantly. The fickle internet began to swing. Comments appeared. Maybe Penhaligon did overreact. Was it entrapment? In his office overlooking the Thames, Arthur watched the clip with David, his PR chief. We have to sue, David urged, pacing the room. She's twisting everything. If this narrative takes hold, it undoes months of reform. Arthur stared out at the grey river, looking incredibly weary. No lawsuits, David. She wants a fight. She wants me to use my power to crush her so she can prove her point that I'm a bully. We aren't going to do that. Then what do we do? David asked. Call Sarah Jenkins at the BBC, Arthur said, turning from the window. Tell her I'm ready for that live interview. We do it tomorrow night, 1 hour before Brittany's segment airs. David was stunned. Sarah Jenkins. She eats CEOs for breakfast. She won't throw softballs. I don't need softballs, Arthur replied, his voice heavy with a secret he had kept for 6 months. I just need the truth. It's time everyone knew the whole story. The BBC studio was deathly quiet. Millions of viewers were tuned in as the red light on camera, 3, illuminated. Sarah Jenkins, the nation's toughest journalist, sat across from Arthur Penhaligon. He wasn't wearing a suit. He wore a simple navy sweater and looked disarmingly vulnerable. Sarah leaned forward, her expression serious. Mr. Penhaligon, tomorrow night, Brittany Vane airs an interview claiming your behavior on Flight 882 was entrapment. She says you deliberately dressed like a vagrant to provoke a reaction. Was it a performance? Arthur took a deep breath. He reached beside his chair and picked up the faded navy hoodie with the bleach stain on the pocket, the same one Brittany had sneered at. He laid it gently on his lap. It wasn't a performance, Sarah, Arthur said quietly. This hoodie didn't belong to me. It belonged to my younger brother, Jamie. The studio atmosphere shifted instantly. Sarah stayed silent, letting him speak. 48 hours before that flight, I received a call. Jamie had been in a motorcycle accident. I flew to New York immediately. I sat by his bed for 2 days, but he never regained consciousness. He died at 4:17 a.m. on the morning of my return flight. Arthur traced the bleach stain with his finger, his voice thick with emotion. I went to his apartment to gather his things and found this on his chair. It still smelled like him. I was in shock. I couldn't bear to put a suit back on. I wore this because I just wanted to feel close to him for a few more hours while I flew home to tell our mother her youngest son was gone. He looked directly into the camera lens, addressing the nation. When I boarded that plane, I wasn't the chairman. I was a shattered man looking for a quiet seat to mourn. Brittany Vane didn't see a grieving human being. She saw a cheap piece of clothing and an opportunity to feel superior. When she kicked my brother's clothes across the aisle, she wasn't kicking trash. She was kicking the only piece of him I had left. The interview ended in stunned silence. The effect was instantaneous. In the control room of Channel 5, Nigel Baxter watched the feed, his face draining of color. "Pull it," he barked into his headset. "Pull the Brittany Vane interview now. We can't air it. He wasn't a bum. He was mourning his dead brother. If we attack him, the public will destroy us. Miles away, Brittany Vane sat in a dim pub, waiting for her vindication to air on the TV above the bar. She checked her watch. It was time, but her face didn't appear. Instead, a rerun of an antique appraisal show flickered onto the screen. Confused, she checked her phone. Her social media was melting down. The few comments supporting her had vanished, replaced by thousands of messages of disgust. The narrative was locked. She hadn't just bullied a passenger, she had desecrated a man's grief. Brittany turned off her phone and walked out into the cold night, realizing there would be no comeback. She was finished. Back at Heathrow, on the evening flight to New York, Lucy conducted her final walkthrough. She stopped at seat 1A. It was empty, but on the bulkhead wall, a new, discreet brass plaque caught the light. It read simply, "In memory of Jamie Penhaligon. Look closer. Everyone has a story." Lucy touched the plaque gently, smiled, and turned to welcome the boarding passengers, treating the man in the faded jeans exactly the same as the man in the suit. So, the next time you're in an airport or a coffee shop, or just walking down the street, and you see someone who doesn't look like they belong, remember Arthur and his brother's hoodie? Remember that the person you're judging might own the company, or they might just be carrying a weight you can't see. Karma doesn't always hit back with a lawsuit or a firing. Sometimes it hits back with the devastating truth. If you believe that everyone deserves dignity, regardless of what they're wearing, hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder to look closer. And subscribe to the channel for more stories where the underdog bites back. Thanks for watching.